Let's get some more reaction now by speaking live to US political analyst Aidan Smith. Aidan, great to have you back on the show. We did not expect to necessarily be talking to you about this morning, the latest shooting in Minneapolis adding fuel to the fire.
Yeah, I mean, it's something where just really all over social media, and you never want to see any kind of violent content when you're on your feed. But I think just for me personally, seeing it about an hour ago all throughout my feed, just really immensely disturbing stuff. And as we're hearing more about the victim, I think he's 37 years old. He was a healthcare worker for Department of Veterans Affairs. Just really unspeakably tragic, really just shows that this could be what we're seeing in Minneapolis, potentially a turning point. And just even looking at the political angle, just looking at that and how that could affect the midterms, I think that this is something that is instilling a lot of really, really deep pent up frustration among a lot of Americans. And how this will navigate over the next few months is obviously remains to be seen. But this is something that I think could be really pivotal in terms of public opinion on ICE, the administration, at least for the midterms and maybe even 2028.
Of course, Renee Nicole Good was someone else who was shot and killed earlier this month. How pertinent is it that this is all happening in a state and in a city that has voted a certain way compared to how Donald Trump is treating political opponents?
Yeah, I mean, Minneapolis is a city, I think it has, I don't per se quote me on this, but I think it has about 600,000 people. So it's a very mid-sized American city, liberal reputation in the Midwest. And a lot of people have noted that this decade is almost really kind of becoming the decade of Minneapolis. We saw George Floyd's murder in 2020, resulting protests. That was in Minneapolis. Tim Walz, obviously governor of Minnesota. You have so many high-profile Democratic politicians, Representative Ilhan Omar, for example, from Minneapolis. I think for a lot of Republicans, it's become a target of a lot of rhetorical criticism in the same way that 10, 20 years ago, you'd hear a lot of conservatives talking a lot about California in a negative way, and kind of like how Democrats talk about Texas or whatever. Walz being the VP nominee last year, I think, is something where Trump and his administration and inner circle, that kind of intensifies it as far as seeing Minneapolis as what they want to be a ground zero for sending federal troops down, and why this is becoming the battle it is in a city that population wise, it's hardly Los Angeles or New York, you know what I mean? And that is why I think it's significant in that way.
Yeah, what are the nationwide implications? We've got the midterms much further down the road later this year. But is the sort of clash between people in Minneapolis and ICE agents reflective of how the country is, or is it merely reflective of actually the deep political divisions in the US right now, with people siding with one or the other dependent on their views already aligned?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something where when it comes down to it, you'll probably have people say it's a 50-50 thing in the US. I think it's a lot closer in a lot of cases to 40-40-20, i.e. 40% automatically usually aligned with the Dems on a specific issue, 40% with the GOP, 20% a bit more malleable. I think that what we're seeing is, and obviously depending on your feed on social media, if you're already following people on the left or the right or whatever, you'll be seeing a specific thing kind of vocalized in terms of narrative. But I think public opinion polls shows that, I think I saw polls showing that 53% of the broader electorate thought that Renee Good's killing was unjustified. Only 35% thought it was justified. So it shows that there's going to be a really strong division regardless. But let's say 20% generously, or maybe 15 or 10% to be more conservative, are malleable. It definitely looks like criticism of ICE is something that maybe 10 years ago it was more relegated to people on the left wing of the Democratic Party. Now you're seeing a lot of voters, including some people who sometimes vote for the Republicans, really siding with Democratic criticisms on this issue. And, this kind of video going viral, beyond obviously it being a tragedy, it's also just an optical disaster. And I think that it has the potential to really, really shift public opinion on this regard going forward.
The US president likes to stay busy, doesn't he, Aidan? We've had a week where he gave quite a long speech at the World Economic Forum. There were plenty of critical voices against him there. We've since seen a couple of days of peace talks, unprecedented peace talks with all three parties in Ukraine, Russia and the US in the same room. And now we've got Donald Trump today threatening new tariffs against Canada because of its trade deal with China. Or is that really more about his personal relationship with the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think that if the Conservative Party of Canada won in the 2025 general election, don't think that this would have been replicated. I think that's something you've really seen as a trend since Trump took back office is domestic policy of foreign countries is something that U.S. foreign policy under Trump care more about. And just as an example of this, you saw the Department of State release a very politically right-wing memo decrying Western Europe's immigration policies. Obviously, if you really think about it, it doesn't have anything to do with U.S. foreign policy, how many immigrants France or Germany lets in. But you're seeing kind of this very hardened ideological transformation of a lot of foreign policy aspects of the U.S. government in a way that's very different. And I think that's kind of crystallized in how Trump interacts with leaders who are kind of aligned with the left, like Mark Carney in Canada, or how he's very friendly towards more right-wing leaders abroad, Javier Milei in Argentina, Bukele in El Salvador. And it'll be interesting to see where that goes forward over the next 3 years.
Yeah, interesting stuff. That's a US political analyst, Aidan Smith, joining us live from the US. Thanks, Aidan.